available, yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
I think I've heard about 5 questions, and I'm not seeing 5. Where are they?
5 points for completing the section. Maybe that's where the number 5 came in.
Okay, so would you help me identify the 5?
It's just for, like, if you answer all these questions and we get a full 2 pages.
Oh,
5 points.
that's, that's the points,
Yeah,
not,
yeah,
not the
exactly.
number of questions.
Yeah, oh, yeah.
I got it, got it.
Yeah, maybe, yeah.
Yeah,
We can make that a little bit more explicit too, yeah. Any other questions about number 1? So we move on to number 2? Okay, yeah.
Am I correct in assuming, as a matter of definition, that race and nationality are one and the same?
No, and they're not.
No,
And in fact,
okay.
you know, it's so interesting, my family is
I just
Venezuelan.
need clarification.
Yeah, no, definitely. So, you know, racial categories are really those categories that have been prescribed by government. That's kind of how we distinguish them. And then, you know, and everybody self-identifies as they choose. So that's why with the city, and it's on our form, we always have the option of other, if you want to check more than one box. And we can share some best practices for how you would ask that. But I always say that that's so funny because, like I said, my family is from Venezuela, but we are white Eastern European Jews from who knows when, who stayed in a little enclave, right, and in Venezuela. So, but we're white, right? So it's just, so racially, but ethnically also we're Jewish, and then my dad's whole side, their nationality is Venezuelan,
Okay.
right? So what a funny, you know what I mean? That it doesn't fall so cleanly, yeah. Let's do number 2. So we have this continuum on becoming an anti-racist multicultural institution, which is by Crossroads Ministry. They're an amazing anti-racist organizing and organizational development organization. So many words. And they put this together to kind of show that there's a progression that an organization could make. You know, we all start in different places. But from being an organization that's exclusive, and we still have many of those, and we historically have had many of those in this country, ones that are overtly and explicitly and intentionally exclusionary toward people of color. And all the way up to an organization that is fully inclusive, and it's just, you know, living racial equity in everything that they do. And so what we're asking folks to do is to actually look at this continuum and think about, where is your organization? Do a gut check, right? You know, where are you in terms of your progression from, you know, toward becoming a multicultural, anti-racist organization? And then just reflect on it. So this whole chunky paragraph of stuff is to think about, you know, where is your board? Where is your staff? Where are your partners in thinking about becoming anti-racist or, you know, becoming an organization that is about racial equity? And reflect on that. You know, we're kind of at this place in our understanding, or, you know, some people are really at this place in their understanding, and others I think are more at this place in their understanding. And we realize that this may not be something that, like, just the grant writer can sit down and decide. It's most likely going to be a conversation with a bunch of folks. Maybe it's for a staff meeting, maybe it's for an executive and board meeting. It's up to you to kind of decide who needs to give input on this. And it's not science. So we're not asking you to, like, study every category and then, you know, take a poll and, like, calculate the numbers. We're asking you to do a gut check. And we're asking you to kind of locate your organization. So we use this at the city sometimes with different departments. We do all kinds of anti-racism training at the city. And I find again and again that people are, like, between 3 and 4. And this is, we're, as an institution, we've been doing this work for 11 years now. And sometimes people will be like, you know what though? I know my manager and that team is still stuck in number 2. And other times they'll say, well, but did you hear about that department over there and that team's efforts? Like, I think they're more of a 5. And so you find that maybe as an institution, you may not be in any one column. So talk about that. Talk about, you know, where are you at and where are you not at?
And for the video's purposes, this document can be found online on the main webpage for the Civic Partner Funding Program. So it's downloadable on there. So if you want to reference that to any of your board, staff, anyone else to look at, they can download it off of there too.
Forgot about the video.
There's some things that don't make sense unless I know, right? Like, I don't know what column 1, 2, and 3.
Excuse me.
Yeah.
Is the racial equity assessment a part of all of the grant categories in the office,
Great question.
in the department?
That's a great question. This is the first program where we're doing it in this way. I will say though that a lot of our programs, like our youth arts funding program, for instance, the priority for that funding is serving youth who don't have access to the arts. And statistically in the city of Seattle, you can actually measure it based on race and income. Those who are low income and those who are kids of color have the least access to arts, so they end up becoming the priority for that program. Our Smart Ventures program prioritizes unique, innovative arts programs that serve communities that have traditionally not gotten funding through our office, through some of our other programs, or fall outside the box. And a lot of those groups tend to be more diverse communities of color or immigrant refugee communities. And then our Arts Mean Business funding program is specifically geared toward organizations whose board staffs and artists and audience, or who they serve, communities that they serve, reflect historically underserved communities. And so a lot of our other funding programs, but each funding program has a different way that it frames it. This one is one that was probably the original funding program of the office, the reason why it was created, which was it was originally created decades ago to fund the arts organizations that existed in the city back then, which is like the symphony, the opera, the ballet, you know, and if you look at those organizations, while they've definitely progressed over the years, there are some historical, structural, institutionalized practices and policies and procedures that set up our funding programs in a way where there is a disparity and we can measure and see it. And this is not true not only for our office, but all across the country for arts funders in every kind of funding, in every kind of program and service that any kind of government agency does, where there are disparities based on those institutionalized practices. And so we are trying to implement step by step ways to address those disparities, and this is a first step in this program to really take it that much further than what we've done in the past.
So is it possible to submit the responses to this along with applications for another program?
You can, we'll invite, like if anyone wants to do a self-assessment and submit it to us, if you're looking, just so that we have that information in terms of creating tools, we're happy to. We know that the reason why we attach it to this funding program, to be honest, is because we knew that Diane and I were like, we could actually put this out and invite anyone who wants to submit a self-assessment, go through this process so we can really learn what the community needs. We would love that, but for most organizations, they're not gonna be motivated necessarily to take the time to do it unless it's attached to something tangible. That's why we linked it to this funding program.
But through our 3 racial equity learning cohorts, which are a total of about, 28 hours of training time and then coaching throughout, they're gonna do an intensive organizational assessment. Like, this, but like this on multiple steroids and with lots of feedback. So, yeah.
We have a lot of different programs in the office that are getting at this racial equity piece in multiple different ways because different things are going to have impact and create motivation for people and the desire to do this in different ways and what that they have the capacity to do. So we also have a whole series of different individual racial equity workshops. We have the cohort that is turning commitment into action. It's a racial equity learning cohort where we invite arts and cultural organizations to sign up with 2 or 3 people from their organization to actually go through the intensive cohort training program. And then we've got programs for individual artists. We've got we have a whole arts and social change planning committee that does different work out in the community with partner organizations. And then we're trying to develop some toolkits that are available online. Currently online, we actually have a web page where we have some really basic links and some basic resources that are already there that people can access. So again, we're trying to access it and reach out to different people in whatever way that they can come on board and that we can all move forward as a community.
So, if I look just at the artists that we bring to our program, we would score a certain place in this continuum. If I look at our board and our staff, we would score a completely different place. And if I look at our outreach programs in the schools, it would be a different place. So in my write-up, I should account for all of those.
Yeah, I would reflect on those various pieces, but then I would also think about, well, when you average them, kind of put them together as an organization, where are you? Yeah, but good to talk about the different pieces, because it's very true for all of us.
Yeah, because a lot of the organizations that I've talked to about this, you know, they might have an education department that they feel is like a 4,
Right.
but their board is like a 1.
Right, exactly.
So,
Right.
yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
Great. So for the last question that we're asking, what steps have you taken or do you plan to take in order to establish, develop, or continue policies, practices, and procedures that increase racial equity in the following areas? And really we want you to speak to all that apply. So thinking about training, hiring and retention, board development, artist selection, programming, community engagement and partnerships, audience development and demographics, and then any other organizational work that you want to know. Again, in 2 pages, all of these questions, we're just asking you to touch on this, but these areas are where we can then go dig in specifically, like, oh wow, a lot of people are saying that they really want to increase and need support around hiring and retention of people of color. Great. We know that that's a focus for us. That's how this is useful for us. And also we want you to talk about your strengths and assets, right? So like you were saying, if you think, you know, maybe some areas are really in a different place and you want to lift that up, this is a great place to do that. And then talk about, where do you see room for growth? And be honest, and what we hope is that this is a useful exercise, right? So that it'll inform us, but it'll also inform you. And then as you're doing it, you might say, oh, I'm going to sign up for the next racial equity learning cohort because I want to be part of a multiracial cohort that is actually building together. Any questions about this last one? Okay, and how about as a whole, how is this feeling to folks? Any questions about this 2-page submission?
I would guess that your hope is that maybe 6 years from now, you'll be in a place where rather than just getting full score by participating and giving you the information, you would be looking at actually judging an organization on how diverse it is.
And not even just how diverse,
Right.
but in how they're actually like living, embodying, right? No, and that's a piece of it, but you're right, yeah, exactly.
Yeah, and I do want to, even though no one's asked this specifically, but I want to address this because it's come up in other questions that we've gotten out in the field, and also from seeing what other cities have done. Diana and I talked a lot about this, because this is something that I think a lot of organizations feel like, oh, but you know, like if the city's 30% people of color, then does that mean we have to have that in terms of our board, staff, audiences, all that stuff? It would be great, you know, but we realize that because of the structural racism that exists in our society, there are challenges to achieving those goals, and that we're much more interested in organizations really working in their institution of what kinds of changes need to happen in terms of policies and procedures and practices and programming to actually get at the root of why this diversity does not exist everywhere. And that if you just look at the kind of the diversity on the surface of just achieving those goals without understanding why that's of value and what actually needs to happen to really make those changes sustainable, it's not gonna be sustainable. As an example, I mean, some other states, as I mentioned before, have also stated you have to have that, your audience has to be 30% people of color. And then a lot of people end up just trying to do that, but then it actually doesn't get at the stuff that actually makes that such a struggle. A lot of arts organizations find it a struggle to find that diversity, and it's because a lot of the things that they have in place they might not even realize are actual perceptual barriers to communities feeling like they're going to be welcomed in that space, want to even be a part of that space. As a simple example, there are some great board leadership training programs for people of color in the city. But then a lot of these these trained people get placed onto boards because a lot of arts organizations and other social service organizations want more diverse boards because they think if we have a more diverse board, everything else will change. But then the diverse board members come on and they realize really quickly that they're really only being asked to serve on the board because of their race. Not because they happen to be a lawyer and have legal expertise, not because they might be an incredible artist and be able to give expertise in that way, and they start feeling really tokenized. And then in addition to that, they feel like they're kind of like their own isolated island on this board where everything still functions the way that even regardless of what they say, they're not really being heard. And they don't have much agency to really make changes that would actually help encourage all the other facets of the organization that need to change to really create the end result that the board was hoping to get, which was to actually maybe get more audience that was more diverse, right? So and then soon those board members literally, I've gotten calls from people like, I go, how can I get off this board? I don't want to be on anymore. Because they don't feel like they're really being engaged for who they are and what expertise and impact they want to make. And so those are Band-Aid efforts that don't really get at the root of the problem, which is how can you as a whole organization, everyone in the organization should be working at, not everyone in the organization expecting that this one person of color is going to make all the changes that will magically transform the organization. So we're really trying to get, and the way we're trying to get it is not, other city agencies around the country have also said, we'll give you these huge grants if you do this, this, and this. And then again, it's kind of surface, and if that funding goes away or anything like that, those efforts will go. I was actually at a public meeting, and I know this is being videotaped, but I was actually at a public meeting where someone said, remember those diversity initiatives in the 90s where we had to like all of a sudden show this diversity in our audience? You know, and thank goodness we don't have to do that anymore. You know, with that funding dried up because of the dot-com bust in the early 2000s, we didn't have to, you know, go jump through hoops to try to get funding anymore. People, they actually said that. They didn't realize I was in the back of the room and I finally had to stand up. But that's the reality when those diversity initiatives where people just see like, oh, if I can get funding, if I do this now, but if that funding goes away, there's no desire to continue that. We would much rather have it be much more step-by-step and strategic, but where people and organizations really understand why this is actually valuable, not only for, you know, ethical and moral reasons, but just because you really do believe that our communities and our arts organizations and who we serve and the programs that we offer will be that much more richer, vibrant, and reach many more people who want to engage with your organizations because you have truly transformed the institutional aspects of how you do your work so that they are more inclusive. And that's what our aim is, because we really think that that's what's going to make the arts and cultural sector that much more vibrant, rich, and sustainable for the long run. So that's what we're working towards. And so it's going to be a slower progress. And yes, maybe 6 years from now, maybe actually, like I said, the next cycle will probably incorporate some of these aspects into the criteria in the regular part of the application, but we want to do it step by step because we know that if you make a huge paradigm shift right away, all you get is people who are resisting or doing it for the wrong reasons, and we much rather encourage, you know, the real desire to make these changes. Yeah.
This is not on that piece, but what is the boundary of Seattle? Because it seems to me that's loosely used. And you had made a comment of one group, and I'm trying to think of where they were.
Yeah, so the boundaries, the city of Seattle, there are some hard lines that the city has determined. I will say that our office, we, on one end, we sort of respond to that, but partly actually because of this racial equity work, in this program, it's a little bit gray, and I know people hate gray, because they'd much rather like, yes or no, am I in or am I out? And part of it really depends on, like, if you are right on the border of Seattle, like, an area that's always, which side of South Park, for instance, you might fall on. Like, if you're really based on the other side, you know, the White Center side, but you serve a lot of people in Seattle, and because of the demographics of that neighborhood, et cetera, we've made, again, depending on the program and depending on, who you're serving and where your programming takes place. Like if the majority of your programming is taking place in Bellevue, because Bellevue also has an arts commission, then we're gonna actually probably default just so that we make sure we prioritize the money. Because again, if we spread it all too thin, it's not gonna benefit anybody.
Okay, so what about, I mean, I hear West Seattle and White Center, and then the dividing line is Roxbury. So anything on the north of Roxbury is West Seattle, anything on the south is White Center. Is that all still considered Seattle?
Yeah, in terms of the city's definition, the technical definition, yes, north of Roxbury, West Seattle is in the Seattle that we're talking about. And a lot is based on the tax funding structure. And then that south of that line is usually considered outside of Seattle, but there's also For Culture who, they actually, their funding, they prioritize any organization that is actually based just outside of the Seattle border.
Yeah,
So we actually partner with them a lot, and their funding programs mirror ours. And because they prioritize, like if you're actually based in Seattle, you actually get kind of not as high a priority as if you're based just outside of Seattle for them. And because of that, that's the only reason why we then prioritize more inside Seattle to balance that out. So we're both trying to balance out each other.
So
And it's not because
South Park and
is
White Center are
considered-
considered on the border?
So South Park usually is considered in Seattle,
Okay.
and White Center is considered outside Seattle, but part of King County. And so if you're on those borders, usually, like I said, like I will often call up my counterpart at For Culture and say, there's this organization that want to play us, but they technically fall outside Seattle lines. He actually makes a note of that, and he does the same thing for us. Like there's this organization, they fall in, you know, and we do try to balance each other out with our funding so that overall there's equity in terms of making sure that as many organizations are served as possible. But partly where the gray area falls in, as I mentioned earlier, is there's a lot more organizations that do not even have a facility. They don't have a space. They might use a mailing address of their board member who might live outside of Seattle, but all of their programming, everything that they've ever done happens in Seattle, and the majority of who attends their events are based in Seattle. Those are the organizations where even though the mailing address may be the board person who lives in Bellevue, where because they can in the application demonstrate the impact that they have in Seattle, and they're a virtual organization without a facility, those are where we've made the exception.
Any other questions about this new piece and this 2-page addendum?
It's not a question, it's just a comment. I think I've been around long enough to remember how this all got started, even in the late 90s. And there was a certain workshop that every city employee had to take.
We still have one, it's a newer version, but yeah, Erase the Power of an Illusion.
There you go. It wasn't called that at the time.
Oh.
That's a update. But it's very, very heartening to know that the work has continued and evolved. It really is, because, you know, you think, well, yeah, this is what they're doing now, and they're gonna be doing it any other time, so bravo.
Wow, thank you for saying that. It's a lot.
Yeah, and I first of all, ditto everything you just said, but also, having had conversations about this with our board and with our program teams, and we're all volunteers, and most of us live here in this neighborhood, and we talk about how, you know, there is a disparity in the organizers and as opposed to the attendees a lot of the time. And so it's really nice to have some language to bring back to those discussions to help us to really assess where the weaknesses are or where some changes might need to come from. So I really appreciate just the material that you're providing to us to do this assessment.
Great, thank you. You know, and we always do invite feedback, like if you go through this process, you know, and you can actually, since it's really only Diana and I are going to be looking at the two-page assessment, you can be, like if there's questions like you realize when you're talking about having the conversations in your organizations, because I will say that the first step for any organization in terms of doing any kind of racial equity work is those conversations raise up so much. You'll immediately start feeling where some people have a line where when you start talking beyond that, where it gets, and then trying to figure out ways to navigate those things. But talking about where there's certain triggering points and stuff like that, and being really about the way the questions are phrased. And it's not necessarily our jobs to make everyone feel comfortable. What we're actually inviting people to do is to actually push past those, and see how we all like to be comfortable and we like to make everyone feel good. And it's not about feeling good or bad, but it is about leaning in and being, the new term I've been hearing is about creating brave space as opposed to safe space. Safe space kind of, some people think, oh, then everyone's going to feel comfortable. If you're comfortable, then that means some people are checking out or not really engaging. But creating brave space where all of us know that some of this work, a lot of this work, all of this work is not going to be easy. In fact, will be really hard for everyone. And that we're trying to encourage people to engage, lean in, and be brave. And being brave means there's going to be a wealth of emotions that will come up at any time, and rather than to check out or to give up or to like, I don't even want to deal with this anymore, and put up walls, experience that, we're all human, and try to think about it. What are those things that trigger things? Are there certain words that are triggering things? Are there certain questions that are triggering things? And then to work through it together. And it's really about anything organizations can do to build trust with each other, to really continue to have these conversations that's going to get your organizations further along the path than anything else. Again, going back to relationships.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.
Now, are there any questions about any of applying for this program? I know it might seem overwhelming, it's like a lot, and I did say that part of this is the most strenuous grant application, but a lot of it, again, was designed to be a sustainable arts organization. These are the pieces of things that you really should have in place if you're hoping to do impactful work. You should have a budget of what you're planning to spend and how you're planning to cover those expenses. You should have a history of the events that you have been doing and at least know how many audience people, even if it's ballpark, have been participating. You should have basic information about your board and who they are, and you should have some basic staff credentials, and you should be able to talk about the programs that you do in a way that invites people to want to engage and know more, right? So all the pieces that we have in the application are designed to really help you actually create basically a basic a template of information that's useful, whether you're applying for our grant, for other grants, or just to make sure that you've got all the pieces in place to really create strong, sustainable programming for your organization. Yes?
I have a question about the funding requests. So I served on a board where we actually gave grants to people, and that was really fun, evaluating grants. So people would send in grant applications and they would say, I'd really love to get $7,000, and then other people would send in one and say, all I need is $283 to do this thing. Anyway, as we were approaching evaluating them, we couldn't help but have our impressions of their application colored by what they were requesting. And so I'm curious, because I've been talking with my board, we've gotten funding from you
Yes.
guys,
Yes.
a history of getting funding. And we've been talking about, well, what if we added this new little component to our program? We've got all these great reasons why it would be great, but let's see if we could ask for $800 more.
That's a good question.
Yeah.
In this program, thank you so
Thank
much.
you. Thanks, everyone.
Good to meet you.
Bye.
Thanks.
Take care.
In this program, since it's based on your organization and not project-based, it's the one program where we don't actually ask you to make a specific request.
Okay, got it.
But
Right.
the part where the question does come up is, actually, not anymore. Because remember I said, like, I cut out 1 year of budget information and staffing information that you need to include, and that's your budget year. And the reason why is, we used to ask you for the 2 most recently completed fiscal years of information, your current year budget and staffing information, and then your projected next year budget and staffing information. And because the projected next year was always the most problematic for everybody, that's the column I took out for this application cycle so that people don't have to worry about it. And mostly it came up because for large institutions, they have to have boards approve all the stuff before they can even show it publicly, so they're concerned about putting something down that had been approved by the board. Smaller organizations, lots of times are like literally doing stuff month by month, and they haven't even created their next year's budget yet at the time of application, so that meant they had to throw something together without having the proper, thought behind it. So because of that, I really actually didn't even feel like what people were submitting in that column was even necessarily
Reality.
reality. Yeah. So I felt like, why waste their time in going through that pointless exercise? It was useful for panelists in some ways, because it kind of gave us an idea of the picture of what your intentions are. But I will say that more people in that column tended to be overly optimistic than anything else, so I don't think it was. But so it used to be that column is where you had to put in what your budget line item that you're expecting from this office, and that's where that question would come up.
Okay.
But now it's no longer an issue.
Right, okay.
And even if it were, like in your current year budget, well, though everyone who's already funded is already, and anyone who's not, just put 0, right? But I would say that in general for, in the past, most funding organizations, if they say that their funding has been pretty level, and ours has been, that if you still had to put in that budget year, that for this particular program, it would be unrealistic to put in something higher
Right.
if they're messaging that it's been pretty level. And if they tell you, like, the Arts Commission for the state, they've actually said pretty candidly that their funding's been diminishing. It's kind of unrealistic for organizations to increase. You can ask for the same amount, even though they say it's decreasing, but to ask for a significant increase when the funds are even less, for any arts funder who says that their funds are less, is not
That makes sense.
savvy. Yeah. Any other questions?
Yeah, another question, so I saw in there was talking about the application using your tax number.
Oh, yes.
But we are, we have a nonprofit number, but we use Shunpike for our 501c3.
Oh, good question,
So,
okay.
so what number should we use?
Fiscal umbrellas. So here's the way the online system works for fiscal. If you are an entity and you have your own tax ID number, you should still apply using your tax ID number. There is actually a question, and I can't remember, to be honest, right off the top of my head, whether it's in the profile section or in the application, but I think it's in the application section. It will actually ask, for this application, are you using a fiscal sponsor? And if you are, be sure to click that box. We've had some who, for some reason, they didn't click that box, and later on, they couldn't figure out why things weren't syncing up. Click that box, and then it will open up, then you'll put in your fiscal umbrella's name and contact information and their tax ID number in that place. And then that links it up. Now, the one thing that people have run into trouble on in doing that is they'll click that they have a fiscal sponsor. In order for your application to be linked with your fiscal sponsor actually has to have a profile in the system. Shumpike does, and I believe there's a couple of other entities, like Seattle Neighborhood Group, I think does, and but there's some other, like some people have an unusual fiscal sponsor that doesn't necessarily do it a lot, but happens to be nonprofit. You need to be sure that before you fill out that part of the application, that you have, your fiscal sponsor needs to at least fill out the profile. They don't need to apply, right? They just need to fill out the profile, and then, so that you can be linked up to them.
Great.
Good question, yeah. And the other thing, again, as I said, this program does not require people to be 501c3, so because of that, you don't necessarily actually need to, and actually in any case, you don't really need to have a fiscal umbrella, but a lot of organizations that do have a fiscal umbrella, there's an agreement between you and your fiscal umbrella that anything that you apply for, you need to, yeah, and that's why we set it up so that it has that flexibility, even though we actually don't require that. Any other questions that anyone else had? I know it's a lot.
Oh, so
yes.
you said that the application is not yet ready. When do you?
So
when
we
do you
were
suppose?
told by the online, based on the date that we told, and we decided to put on another week of cushion time just in case. So our hope is that they will have those back-end changes updated and made so that the application can be available online by May 19th, so a week from today. That is our hope. We'll update if that's not the case. But what I can tell you is that in the guidelines, in the back of the guidelines, there is a section that actually talks about what a complete application includes. And then it also includes the attachments that you'll need. I would encourage for anyone who's really antsy and wants to start looking at stuff to at least look at that section so you can kind of anticipate what you'll need. And just since you guys came to the workshop, I'm gonna breeze through this just a little bit so you have it. Like I said, basically the profile stuff, which any of you who already, actually, any of you can set up your profile now. So even though the application's not available, even for you new organizations, the trick to get into that, because when the application goes live, it'll actually say, there'll be a link that will you can actually access the application, start your application, right? But for those of you who are already being funded, you can just go to the way you normally go. Those of you who are new, if you want to set up your profiles now, which will take care of some of the work, and you could actually take care of some of your global stuff too, even, is that on the funding page that covers this, and on the sheet that I handed out that has the new racial equity assessment, the bottom of that sheet where it says the link for the Continuum on Becoming a Multicultural Anti-Racist Institution, maybe downloaded at, that link is the same link that takes you to this funding page for this whole program. Okay, so on that page, there is a section that, you'll be able to access the guidelines. So if you want to get started, the first thing would be to access the guidelines and look through the guidelines. There's also the attachments that we handed out tonight. And then there's a section that's called Manager Award. That's really for the organizations who are already funded, but if you click on the link there to go log into the account, you can actually go to our online setup and actually register your organization, set up your profile, and even start working on some of the global data stuff, filling the file folders with your program information, event information, stuff like that. Financial information, so you have a head start. Because like I said, the application itself is just the narrative, and then just clicking on boxes, right? So in terms of the profile section, it's, like I said, it's really just your contact information, your mission statement, and some historical background. The global data section, the pieces are really board contacts, staff contacts, and then some audience and volunteer data, like how many staff members, full-time employees you have, or not, volunteers that you have, et cetera. Some helpful hints in that arena. In the instructions, we kind of talk about this, but really for the board, you don't have to, like if you have a lot of board members, you don't have to list every single board member in the online thing. Really, you just need to list your board officers, the leadership of your board. And for your staff, same thing. It doesn't have to, like if you have a lot of staff, though tonight it's really smaller organizations, so it's not as applicable as like some organizations that have like over 100 staff. This is where it's really helpful for them, right? You just have to list really the leadership staff in the online system. Because that's all we're looking for there, because you're gonna need to actually submit a staff list and a board list anyway, and that's where whatever format you currently have it in, you can just, again, I would say just for ease sake, just convert it to a PDF and just upload that into the system, because you're gonna need to upload whatever you have in the system. And for a lot of small organizations, like, but I already spent the time and inputted all this stuff in the online system, and now I'm having to submit it. It seems redundant, but it's really because for large institutions, rather than having listing 100 staff people or 50 board people, they just really, for everyone, you just need to list your key staff, your key board, and then just submit the online documents as attachments that are your full board list. So, and then for your financial information, what we're looking for, because this is the question that comes up a lot, is we are on a calendar year system. So when we say the previously two fiscal year, finished fiscal years, and your current year. So your current year, so if you're on a calendar year, your current year is going to be your 2015 financial statement, what you're currently working on. If you are like a September through August organization or July through June organization, then again, it's wherever you are currently, the budget year that you're currently spending money in and accounting for. So for like anyone who's September through August, it would be September 1st, 2014 through August 31st, 2015. You know, and any variation of that. That's the one that kind of, people are like, when you say 2015, I don't know, it means like for your current year budget, it's the one that you're currently working on. Previously to, it's the 2 years before that you've actually completed, that you actually have finished. And like I said, we're no longer worrying about the future budget. So you can actually start inputting that stuff into the online system. So, and this is where reading the instructions on the online system will help. Some quirks of the system, these are things that we have not been able to get the web developer who created the system to fix yet, because we were their first guinea pigs in developing the system, and they now have huge new clients like the National Endowment for the Arts, etc. So some of these quirky things, we just now just tell people these are quirks. When you enter any numbers, like in the budget area or audience attendance figures like that, except for the narrative section where you can use commas, don't use commas, because for some reason certain boxes, I don't know why, it's not even consistent. Certain boxes, if you enter a comma, anything you enter after the comma will not show up. And this is where that thing of like preview, it will give you the option on every page where you can actually preview, and it'll show you a PDF of the application. You can preview it and you'll see right away, like, we only served 3 people last year. And that's kind of obvious. And it's because you actually served like 3,000, right? But because you put a comma in, it only shows up as 3. So do both, right? Don't use commas in any of the numerical boxes, and then always proof your final thing before you submit it. Online though, it'll look like, you'll see the 3,000 online, but it's just when it converts it to the PDF, the stuff after the comma doesn't show up. Weird quirk. Like I said, the other weird quirk is sometimes the autosave takes so long to kick in that if you move to the next page without pressing the save, everything will be lost. This is the biggest thing, and write this down in the instructions, but if you don't read those, you won't know, and then I've had too many people call in about this, which is on the financial budget page and the staff information page. The first time you go look at it, don't start filling in half the information and then leave. Nothing will save if any of the boxes are left empty. So my recommendation is, if you're not ready to fill in the whole sheet, either wait until you can fill in the whole sheet and press save, or just go in and put zeros in every single box. and then press save. And then that sheet will be saved, and then later on you can go in and fill in the different boxes. But some people, they'll start filling it in halfway, and then they'll go off on a break and not save it, and they'll come back. Or even if they press save, actually, if you filled in half of it and you press save, and you come back, you won't even be able to find that entire year of information. It won't save unless there's something. It's a weird quirk in the system.
I'm
So-
sorry, where is that happen? 'Cause I was making-
Budget.
The budget
The
page,
budget.
and it's called I think it's a staff event page. There's one page that actually tells you to like list how many staff people you have in your artistic programming versus education versus, and how many programs a year do you offer, how many audience members came, how many volunteers you have. I think in both of those pages, you need to actually have something in every box. First time you set it up, before you save it, in order for that year to save. Because people will literally fill in half of it, and they'll go later on when they're clicking their application, and then they can't find that year, and it's just a weird quirk of the system. So those are the biggest quirks that are consistent. So, and then the one other thing, which for people who've been used to the system, it's probably secondhand to you, but for new people, because of quirks, incompatibility between Adobe products and Internet Explorer, if you're, the online system, like when you log in online, most people tend to, because if you use like say Windows, it automatically defaults to Internet Explorer oftentimes. But if you use Internet Explorer, you will have challenges working in this system. So we actually encourage people to go in through Mozilla Firefox, which is free internet browser. It does not have the same kind of incompatibility issues with Adobe products. And the only reason why that's an issue is because some of the things in the system require you, like the PDFs, if you're previewing the system, it will download it in a PDF format. And if you're on Internet Explorer, there's so many challenges that it just doesn't quite make it easy for you. You'll run into trouble. So it's just much easier just to go and use Mozilla Firefox as your internet browser for this. I've been, so far from people who've started to use Google Chrome, I haven't heard of this having challenges with this system, but I know some people have other challenges with Google Chrome, so it's really up to you. But so far, the one that we definitely tested and not run into issues with is Mozilla Firefox.
It works on the Mac with Safari too, though.
Oh, okay, yes, yeah, people on Macs, yes, Safari tends to be a good option as well.
You can use Safari on regular Microsoft too, can't you?
I think so. I don't know.
I
I'm
thought,
Because
yeah, I
wouldn't
thought
guarantee
Safari
it's
was
the
only
same
for
thing.
Mac.
It would work the same. I mean, they'd
Okay,
have
I'm
to
going
change
on my
things.
phone, which is a Mac.
Yeah.
Okay,
Yeah.
you got that, okay.
Yeah, yeah,
That's
yeah.
fine,
Yeah,
okay.
because the city, we have PCs, so I'm less
Yeah.
Mac savvy. So I think I went over like all the different like frequently asked questions that I usually get. But as I said, if stuff comes up, again, the earlier you contact me, the better. I will say that timing-wise, usually this application is due in the end of May. This year I actually gave everyone an extra month because of the new stuff. But unfortunately, because of that, there's the height of when our office goes to, there's these different conferences that are about grant making and about racial equity and about, they all happen to happen right in mid-June. So the balance of me giving you an extra month to do this application is, unfortunately, there's like 10 days in the middle of June where I am actually out of town presenting at conferences. And so I will not be available as easily to respond. So that's where, I mean, I will be back for the full week before the end of the application, but as I said, I'm going to respond to everything in the order received. So people who inquired, earlier on, even if it may take me a while to get back during that middle part of